Okay. Now we're getting back into it. Guys, we're going to try to keep these in about 5-minute sections each. So let's go ahead and bring that up. Don't forget VA2A News is over here at VA2A.news. Hope you enjoy that little spot. I got that up there for you. Headlines starting out over here on the Epoch Times. Guys, I'm a fan of the Epoch Times. I like the Epoch Times quite a bit. Nice place to get some information about what's going on in the world of us, specifically what's happening in some global politics as well. So we see right here that the first charges are brought over here by the Durham report and cast shadow over the Mueller probe. It's a pretty interesting little story right here. The caption is, primary FBI attorney assigned to the special counsel's Russia probe charged with making false statements over forged email. It's a pretty nice one to find out. It's nice to see that some things are moving quite along. Moving back onto that, we've got U.S. economy poised for a strong rebound in the third quarter. Customer spending and employment have recovered quite a bit more quickly than was originally thought, including ourselves had anticipated just a couple of months ago, and that was by Brett Ryan, Senator of the U.S. Economics at Deutsche Bank. Let's go ahead and see. We've got some more White House. Let's go ahead again. White House denies Dems' claim for payroll tax suspension will damage Social Security. We've got a nice little quote coming over right here. It looks like got President Donald Trump right here, a little picture of him signing executive orders extending the coronavirus academic leave during a news conference on August 8th, 2020. Also looking some more on these headlines, lumber shortages, record prices, adding thousands to home construction costs. First criminal charge in Durham probe, we just read about that a little bit. Virginia state senator faces felony charges in monument destruction. This is an interesting right here. This is by Jack Phillips, a Virginia state senator, is facing felony charges related to her involvement in a June protest near a Confederate monument in Portsmouth, Virginia. The department also charged 3 NAACP representatives and a Portsmouth school board member. Now, I read this article a little bit before when the news came out. Apparently, the Senator Louis Lucas she was the one that was actually sitting there while police were attempting to stop the protesters, actually rioters, from pulling down the statue. And what happened was she was telling them that they could not and did not have any authority in that matter. Interesting to see where this goes. It seems like maybe a little bit of common sense is catching back up to us. You know, if people want to take down monuments, there's a civil way to do that, and it's through voting, through referendums and things like that, not through grabbing your monument and just ripping it down. Also, someone was injured during this one right here. We got another one, black voters in Milwaukee, between a rock and a hard place. This is basically an opinion piece that's going on. Looks pretty interesting. Let's see what one of these quotes are. All I can do is stay to myself. Democrats will come back again, talk a good game, and say things that are right to get elected, and then ease away from the platform ideas that help inner city or the African community as a whole. Looks like it's an interesting opinion piece just talking about, well, exactly what you said, what it means to get elected, spend the money, and then do nothing. A couple of interesting things that are going on there. Classifying marijuana same as tobacco, a look at Colorado. It's interesting. How are you guys out there in the comment section and the listeners on classifying marijuana like tobacco? We just had a new law come down through Virginia that makes up to an ounce, I believe. I don't have it pulled up, so if I'm incorrect, please let me know. But makes for up to an ounce a civil violation of some sort. It's no longer criminal. That took place July. I think it was July 1st when the other ones came through. Maybe we'll look at that. But here in Virginia, apparently, there's no more criminal penalty as long as it's 1 ounce or less. It's a $25 civil citation. Are there still stigmas on smoking marijuana? I mean, what is that like? Let me know down in the comments below. If you were someone that would hire somebody that was smoking marijuana, I mean, is it just like a beer? Does it really matter? I don't really know that I particularly care if someone is smoking a joint. I don't know. But that's just me. Let's continue on. Let's find something else. Developing world lockdowns may be catastrophic for the third world poor. Interesting. We've got some thoughts here. Another piece, it's Capital Research Center told Epoch Times that the effective spread of free markets on the poorest people has been to raise them out of poverty, and that this comes along with just from one to another station. It raises them out of poverty. That's what capitalism does. Communism, fascism, things that are locally controlled generally depress people and make it more difficult for them to get out of a class structure and things like that. Extreme poverty shortens lifespans, experts say. COVID-19 and the tough government response to the pandemic appear poised to set back the struggle against acute poverty by years as the world braces for what could be the first increase in extreme poverty in 22 years, according to the Associated Press report. So it looks like we've got some just some reporting about that. Another nice source that shows that the concept of government control, communism, or the social democrats doesn't exactly pull us out of poverty. It sends us back to it. And finally, global freedoms at risk over Beijing's national security law. So if you aren't familiar with this, there's a lot going on over in China. They have a new national security law that was in order to rein in a lot of the protests that were going on for, I think, almost a year over in over there. And what has happened is that it makes that their laws that if you are found to be a dissident of whatever that means, that they can send their law recovery section, their police around the world and bring you back. So there is no real way to get out of whatever it is that you might be. You might not be able to get away from their persecution. And this specifically has to do with Chinese citizens. Interesting stuff. There have been the headlines for you there. I hope that you've enjoyed that. Let's go ahead and get everything set up for the next round. We're going to talk about Virginia General Assembly in this special session. All right, so I pulled up a couple things just to help us keep a few things in mind. When we're looking at our House of Delegates, we've got 100 seats in the House. 55 of those seats are Democrat seats. 45 of those seats are Republican seats. Eileen Filler-Corn is the Speaker of the House. She's the one that controls what goes on and gets the scheduling and stuff like that. She acts just like the Speaker of the House in the House of Representatives for the United States. Moving on over, you see that our Senate, we've got 40, of course. In our Senate, we've got 18 Republicans, 21 Democrats, and 1 independent. And somewhere in here, I believe there's actually a vacant seat. I can't remember which one it is right now, but just know that we've got a vacant seat, and it may be in the Senate right now, but I don't recall. The reason that this is important is because when you see some of the vote tallies later on that we're going to talk about, you're going to notice something like 21 to 19 or 22 to 18. And when you see those, you'll be able to tell pretty much right off the bat that those are just split down party lines, so that the vote would go the Democratic Party 21, and then the Republican and the Independent voted against it or whatever. And so it'll just let you know that just fell down party lines. Same thing with our House. You'll see 55 to 45. You might see 55 to 42 or 43 or whatever, and some abstentions and the next couple things that we're going to look at. Where we find all this information is over here on the Virginia General Assembly, which is easy enough to get to. Okay, and from there we go to laws and resources. From there we can click on the Virginia Legislative Session and or Legislative Information System, and we get here. You can actually just go to lis.virginia.gov. The reason that's important is I want you to know where you can find this information yourself. We've got a couple things up here. It's going to automatically take us to the current special session, which is special session 1 of the 2020 season, but you can choose other special sessions and check out what was going on there. So I'm bringing you this in order to help remind you of just exactly where you can find this information. You will also have links to the videos like the House and the Senate. Since lots of stuff is going on in the House right now, if we click on the House, you can actually go in here and find out what's actually going on in the House and watch it as it happens. You can also download the videos there. This is important for you to know where to get the info, because if you're like me and you find people and you talk about this stuff, even when you talk calmly and rationally, people always want to have that information to back it up. It's nice to have it right here. 2 other things to talk about. Daily floor calendars. You can find out what was talked about on any particular day and what was introduced by going to the daily floor calendars. But also check out the meetings. Now, this right here is showing us the meetings for the House, all right, because that's what's going on right now. The session began on the 18th, and it will go. I don't actually know right off the top of my head if it will go through the 16th, but we've got meeting dates scheduled up through the 16th of December. Generally, the session comes back into play on January 1 and goes on, or actually November, excuse me. So we shall see here exactly where it comes, what goes on. But you can find out all of that stuff right there. That being said, there's also an easier place to do that. Head over to the VCDL. I'm not affiliated with the VCDL. I am a member. I'm a proud member, by the way. I really like what's going on, and this is a great place to get your information. Go over here, sign up. Also, donate to the cause, and Philip Van Cleve and the team will go ahead and work on our rights, work on saving our rights for us. A couple of important things here is when you get here, the very first thing you're going to find out is exactly what we're talking about, what's on the list, like no local gun control. We've got 19 counties, much like we did with the constitutional cities, the constitutional counties. The no local gun control is going over here because it's directly trying to balance the cities and the localities' ability given to them in House Bill 421 last year to make their own local gun control laws, specifically about firearms on government property. Interesting information there, and we're going to jump into that in a minute as well. I just kind of wanted to give you that information, and if you need more, there's so much going on. You can actually download the PDF from the Virginia Citizens Defense League about their firearm bill analysis. Okay, there's 24 pages, lots of stuff that's going on here. You can find out the positions, the whys, the where, and the how of all of the bills that are going on in the Virginia Senate, right, or the Virginia House right now in the General Assembly. And it just makes for a good piece of information to study, so that you can know what's happening. I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, let's actually get over to it. Just take a minute to wash our thoughts out and get some ideas going on as we transition over to this next part. We're getting everything that's come up so far. There's only been 4 bills as of the 19th, so going into the 20th today, things may be a little bit, but there's only been 4 different bills that have been introduced so far. And let's go ahead and look at that. The first bill is House Bill 520, Concealed Handgun Permit and Local Control of Firearms. This bill was introduced by Glenn Davis, and nice bill. The summary of the bill is the provides that any local ordinance that prohibit possession, carrying, or transportation of any firearms, ammunition, or components or combination shall not to apply to a person with a concealed handgun permit, a valid concealed handgun permit. Okay. Notice it doesn't say Virginia here. I haven't gone through and read the entire PDF of the bill, but it's not too long, just several different parts. But when we get into it, that's the short end of the stick, and that's in order to help kind of curb some of that no local gun control stuff, that House Bill 421 stuff that's coming through. Some of you may be thinking about, what about how Senate House Bill 916 or 61, 961. I haven't seen any of that pop back up on the agenda, but Ralph Northam did state that he wanted to bring that back earlier this year, and I actually have a press release from the Office of the Governor that talks about what he wants to do in this special session that he released in April 20th, I believe, and we'll pick that up next. Just know that House Bill 520 is about maintaining your rights to carry anywhere that the locality might keep you from carrying where you could normally carry prior to the locality being given the permission by the government to change their laws because of preemption. Now, if you don't have a concealed weapons permit, you couldn't carry there anyways, like on the property. But if you have one, it's going to give you an exemption so that you could carry. This is good news, especially while we tried to repeal or get preemption put back. I do have a segment on preemption in an upcoming video that will talk about that and how the preemption was actually changed recently in order to accommodate this. How interesting. Okay, moving right along. We're going to actually look at another one jumped up by Mr. Davis, Glenn Davis. This is House Bill 5024, Firearm Sale, Criminal History, Record, Information Check, and Penalty. So this one actually tries to walk back some of that universal background check stuff, and it says that the firearm sales, this bill, the short title, the summary is to eliminate the Class 1 misdemeanor penalty for a person who purchases a firearm for another person without obtaining the required criminal history record information check. The bill also eliminates the question on the form provided to the firearm dealer by the Department of State Police asking whether a prospective purchaser of a firearm has ever been the subject of a mental health temporary detention order and subsequently agreed to a voluntary admission. There's a lot that's going on in this bill right here, and you're going to see that it's actually pretty long really long, so you can really jump down into it. But we've got a couple things that have happened. In Virginia, you can actually possess a handgun specifically from a personal transfer, like your father or something like that, under the age of 21. So you can't actually purchase a handgun because you couldn't go through and fill this paperwork out and be allowed. But you can inherit such things like that and be given such things along those lines. Well, this bill right here, House Bill 5024, aims to reconcile that. It also aims to reconcile some of the more private, like HIPAA information, specifically about a mental health issue or things like that. There's also already a redundancy built into the system. When Attorney General Bill Barr was being questioned just this past week, I think 10 days ago now, or 8 days ago, something like that, one of the members of the committee was berating him and asking about how many firearms had been stopped by the National Criminal Instant Check System, the NICS system, and under the try and buy, you're not able to get a firearm, but you're going to try it anyways just to see if you slip through. She was asking about how many people had been prosecuted, and how many people had been brought to justice over that, or at least gone out and looked. Anyway, the point was, in 1 month, 24, 26,000 people were stopped by the NICS system. So there's quite a bit of redundancy. Virginia doesn't need an additional code or an additional step in order to provide the same service that's already being provided. I'm going to step off 1 second here and just add another piece of my thinking. It's kind of like the survivorship bias, and this, you guys may have seen the meme showing up recently, or if you guys know a lot about World War II or like that kind of stuff, you'll remember that the planes that were coming back from World War II, that after they'd gone their bombing or their fighting runs and everything else, had come back. One of the big things that I forget the engineer that noticed was that, hey, we keep armoring the place where we see bullet holes in the planes. And the problem with that is that, obviously, if the plane is able to fly back safely or return home after being shot up, the places that have the bullet holes in it aren't as important to the plane's flight as the places that don't. So instead of looking for the solution to how we can get more of our aircraft back by the planes that we have with bullet holes, let's look where those bullet holes aren't. Because obviously, if you've got a bunch of shots in the wing, but you don't have a lot of shots in the fuselage area, or the junction where the wing and the actual body of the plane meet, well, then that's where the critical infrastructure is that's being harmed. So we don't need to worry about there, because we're already doing it. We need to worry about where we're not doing it. Same thing with the NICS, same thing with the background, universal background, all that stuff. We've got so many checks going on that law-abiding citizens, you guys already know, it's the survivorship bias. We're already doing what's asked of us, right, in order to maintain and obtain firearms legally, right? We're not the bad guys. But the Senate, the House, and our lawmakers look at us like we're the bad guys. They're looking at us like we're the bad guys because it makes them want to. It makes them feel like we're the problem. We're not the problem. The problem is a different way of coming about those firearms. It's not through the checks that are already there. This bill aims to get rid of some of that process that you're just trying to strangle you or I out even further. Okay, enough said about that. Let's move on to the next one. House Bill 5091, law enforcement officers required to release video or audio recording, discharge a firearm, etc. Okay, so this bill right here requires that whenever a LEO discharges a firearm or uses a stun gun or a chemical irritant on a person, resulting in death or serious bodily injury, any video or audio recording that relates to the incident produced or obtained by a law enforcement officer shall be open to inspection and available and posted to the website that is maintained by the law enforcement agency or on any other website which the law enforcement agency generally posts information and is available to the public that clearly describes how the public may access such data within 15 days of the incident. Okay, so this bill has some text to it as well. It's pretty short though, and this makes a lot of sense. You know, police officers are wearing body cam footage. We want to see that. In fact, what we want to see quite a bit more, just like Mr. Floyd, there's a lot of problems with Mr. Floyd. I think we all would agree that the way Mr. Floyd was handled was probably horrible, right? But it came out much, much later after the fact that there was some additional circumstances going on with Mr. Floyd. what we saw were videos that were posted and edited by people in the media or people that were taking the video. What really needed to happen was all of that footage needed to come out immediately so that people could see how Mr. Floyd was acting. Did he deserve to die? Absolutely not. Was he acting differently than the media portrayed? Absolutely. And that's very important to how you charge and deal with justice, specifically with a law enforcement officer. We need that information. This bill, I see, is a great bill to allow us to have access to it. Okay, going to another one. Finally, we've got, and that last bill, was by Sam Rasool, okay? Introduced by Sam Rasool. We're moving into another one, Senate Bill 5108. The other ones were House bills. This is the Senate Bill 5108, Local Control of Firearms and Concealed Handgun Permit. This one is by Benton Chaffin, okay, Ben Chaffin. So here we go. This one actually echoes the earlier bill by Mr. Davis right there, House Bill 5020. So it's also limiting the requirement that a concealed weapons permit holder couldn't go on to places that a locality, like locality property with a firearm, which is what the VCDL is doing, this no local gun control ordinance. Of course, that would get rid of all of it. If there was no local gun control in all of the places that we go, then none of these bills would necessarily be required. But I guess we should have them just in case people choose to change their mind. Lots of stuff there. The concept back in the day, let's just talk about this for a second. The idea of having local laws that are different throughout the Commonwealth is a problem, because then it puts an undue pressure on someone within the Commonwealth traveling from point to point as a citizen of the Commonwealth who followed the laws of open carry in the Commonwealth that would then be subject to different laws in each locality, and would create an undue burden of that person to just go from place to place in their natural everyday life. This was one of the big issues that really put the VCDL on the map as far as I remember. I remember being a soldier back in the day, just getting my CWP and everything else. And I got my CWP, and because although Virginia was an open carry state, or Commonwealth, there were so many things that were going on from place to place. Like if you couldn't go to Hampton, or you couldn't go to the Jubilee in Chesapeake, or you couldn't do this, or you couldn't do that. So the CWP, because all the laws were different is what I'm saying. So it was difficult to go from spot to spot. Getting the CWP kind of eliminated some of that, and also gave you the ability to carry different round counts. And some of those things still stay true today in the Commonwealth. But then the VCDL won some groundbreaking cases. I can't say that I remember the exact year, but it was around 2001, 2003, 2002, something like that. But what happened was that the state came out with a preemption law that made it so that no locality could make a law about traveling with your firearm and about where you could and could not carry that was more strict than the state. So that made it easy to go from place to place. It also assessed some pretty steep fines to localities that enforced that. I remember, at least I believe I remember, I'm pulling some dust off my memory cells. I believe I remember some cases where Hampton had attempted or violated someone's rights right after the preemption had happened, and that caused the Supreme Court of Virginia, or a court in Virginia, to levy fines upon them for violating the state law. I also remember that when at some point in time, I believe there was some concealed weapons permit reform as well that made it easier to get your CWP. And back in the day, the circuit court might hold your CWPs for months, 6, 7, 8 months, but that's where we got our 45-day de facto turnaround time, and also $10,000 fines, which made localities stop sitting on the CWPs and issue them properly. Okay, so those are just some of my thoughts right there from that instance of which we were talking about. If I was wrong, let me know down in the comments below. Like I said, I'm just pulling off of some memory. Moving on along, I think right now is a great time to kind of talk about Ralph Northam and what he actually said, and this is from the governor's office right here. And this is important. April 10th, 2020, Office of the Governor, spoke funkily right there for a second. Let me go ahead and get a little drink. All right, let's try introducing that section again. I hope you guys are having a fun time with me. Governor Northam signs historic gun safety legislation into law. Richmond, Governor Ralph Northam today, remember this is April 10th, 2020, has signed several landmark gun violence prevention measures into law, including legislation on enacting extreme risk protection orders, requiring background checks on all gun sales, and mandating reporting of all lost or stolen firearms, and preventing children from accessing firearms, and reinstating Virginia's one handgun a month policy. So if you guys forgot about all that stuff, these things are happening right now. One handgun a month is already in effect. If you have a CWP, that does not apply to you, as I found out recently when purchasing some supplies, grabbing a couple things. But yeah, so it was funny to go back in there and go to buy a firearm after so many years of buying firearms without being asked about the one handgun a month. And then I had to show my CWP just to prove that I had it. Interesting. I'm just saying, interesting. Okay, if your children are able to get to a firearm and that results in any kind of negligence or something like that, that's a criminal offense. Reporting your lost or stolen firearm, I believe it's a $250 fine if you don't do it within 24 hours. Let's just talk about something else. So a lot of these things happen to do with like secondary search things. Like how's anybody going to know if you've got good kids and you keep your firearm, in a drawer, right, while you sleep? Well, none of that would actually become important unless a law enforcement officer or some kind of state authority had a reason to be in your house and to be inside of your home, and then was there for one reason, but then finding that out somehow. And that's something that's a real concern. Just think about things like what happened in Massachusetts, or was it Maine, just during the start of the whole beer bug thing, the coronavirus. What was it? A teacher saw a boy who had a BB gun or a .22 in the Zoom meeting window. She was so scared for him that she called cops, and the cops showed up, or the sheriff showed up and talked to the boy's mother. Right, these things happen. So if anyone sees that kind of stuff, and I think it turned out to be a pellet gun, but in any event, the teacher had no business concerning herself with what was in the background of the house. That kind of stuff that we're talking about, like how you have to maintain your firearms away from children or whatever like that, it may seem like it makes a lot of sense, but in reality, it's just a way to charge people with more crimes. Does that make sense? I hope that it does. Okay, anyways, we lose too many Virginians to gun violence. In this past week, we took a bold, meaningful action to make our communities safer, said Governor Northam. I was proud to work with legislators and advocates on these measures, and I am proud to sign them into law. These common sense laws will save lives. Whether or not they're common sense, that's not the question that we're talking about here. This is what he said on April 10th. More than 1,000 Virginians die from gun-related incidents each year. Governor Northam has been a fierce and consistent advocate for gun safety measures in the Commonwealth, and following the tragic May 19 mass shooting in Virginia Beach, he immediately called a special session of the General Assembly to address the gun violence emergency in Virginia. So, in that retrospect, Governor Northam has signed these bills. Senate Bill 70 and House Bill 2 require background checks on all firearm sales in Virginia, which prevent guns from ending up in dangerous hands. Senate Bill 240 and House Bill 647 or 674 establish an extreme risk protection order, which creates a legal mechanism for law enforcement to temporarily separate a person from their firearms when they represent a danger to themselves or others. Virginia is now among 19 states in the District of Columbia in enacting this type of law. Of course, that was as of April 10th, 2020. Senate Bill 69 and House Bill 812 reinstate Virginia's one handgun a month rule to curtail stockpiling of firearms and trafficking. This has to, at some point in time, go to the Virginia Supreme Court or be taken up somewhere legally. We've got to get some kind of movement on all of these things, but to prevent stockpiling by whom? Lawful owners of firearms that purchase their firearm legally? That's like saying you can't buy too many vehicles at one time, or too many lawnmowers at one time, or too many kitchen knives at one time. It just, that makes no sense. Out of all of them, that one's really bothersome for me. None of them make sense, but you get what I'm saying. House Bill 9 requires gun owners to report their lost or stolen firearms to law enforcement within 48 hours or face a civil penalty. Okay, I was wrong. It wasn't 24, it was 48. And House Bill 1083 prevents children from accessing firearms by increasing the penalty for recklessly leaving firearms in their presence. Well, it doesn't really prevent the children from getting access to it. It just increases the penalty, and you're hoping that having mandatory minimums will force compliance, and we know how that works with the criminal justice system. Thanks, Bill Clinton, right? Mandatory minimums, 3 strikes and stuff like that. And then Governor Northam proposed amendments to these bills, Senate Bill 35 and House Bill 421, which we're going to look at in just a second, allow localities to regulate firearms in public buildings, parks, recreation centers, and during public events. And amendments clarify the exemption of institutions of higher education. And that's what the bill earlier that we were talking about with Glenn Davis and the other gentleman, that House Bill 5020 is supposed to help us get around. That House bill right there, 520, would exempt concealed weapon permit holders from the regulations set forth by the localities in Senate Bill 35 and House Bill 421. And next, Senate Bill 479 and House Bill 1004 prohibit individuals subject to protective orders from possessing firearms, requiring them to turn over their firearms within 24 hours and clarify to the court that they have turned over their weapons. Governor Northam amended this legislation at the request of the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance, and this will enhance the safety for victims by allowing judges to hold the respondent in contempt of court if they failed to comply with certain requirements. I can't remember who it was, but wasn't it recently that a man accused of sexual assault rape on a woman up in Northern Virginia was let out of jail due to COVID restrictions, and then he went and shot her and killed her, and then I believe he was shot by the police as well and died. I don't remember the name of that person. This is completely insane. You will let people out of jail for violent crimes that you were holding, and then for the beer bug, for coronavirus, they go out and have been consistently committing crimes, but you want to make someone that has just been accused of one of these protective orders or something like that, who may have done absolutely nothing wrong, turn over all their firearms. And we know that a lot of this stuff is a first to the magistrate wins kind of situation. We also know that how many males are out there reporting sexual abuse upon them? Most males don't. So you get someone that doesn't like you or anything like that, you know where the argument goes. It just reaches way down. So they're going to continue with this. Let's actually go ahead and look at Senate Bill 35, just so that you know. And I'm going to read this. This is the one that allows firearms and ammunition, etc., controlled by localities by governing possession within the locality. This is interesting. So the short title, or the short summary, is that this bill, Senate Bill 35, which was passed in the last session, authorizes any locality by ordinance to prohibit the possession of carrying firearms, ammunitions, or components, or any combination thereof. All right? Parts for lower, there you go. In any building or part owned or used by such locality for government purposes. Any park or owned, operated by the locality. Any recreation or community center facility. Or any public street, road, alley, sidewalk, or public right-of-way, or any other place where the nature that is open to the public is being used or is adjacent to a permitted event, or any event that would otherwise require a permit. Provisions limiting the authority of localities and states governing entities to bring lawsuits against certain firearm manufacturers and others are also repealed. The bill also provides that any firearm received by the locality pursuant to a gun buyback program shall be destroyed by the locality unless the person surrendering such a firearm requests in writing that such surrender of the firearm be sold. The provisions of this bill do not apply to the activities of the Senior Reserve Officer Training Corps, SROTC, such as VMI, operate at a public or private institution of higher education, or any intercollegiate athletics program operated by a public or private institution or of higher education and governed by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or any sports team recognized by the public or private institution of higher education where the sport engaged in by such program or team involves the use of a firearm. And the bill contains technical amendments, and it incorporates a bunch of other bills into it. That just means that this one's a long one. So when we look at this one, I mean, it is pretty long. Maybe that's the original text. But the point is here that pretty much any property or area that's being used for city or government functions, you're not allowed to carry your firearm right now. And the city can make those judgments. So if your city has passed those resolutions, then your city is not, you can't have a firearm on those areas, which therefore means if you're traveling like Virginia Beach, we don't have any of this nonsense currently. So, but if we travel, to a locality that does, and you don't know it, you've got some problems. You're committing a misdemeanor, possibly even a felony, depending on how it's viewed. So there are some issues there. And once again, House Bill 5020, authored by Glenn Davis, will help to alleviate some of that burden, at least for concealed weapons permit holders. And finally, 421, House Bill 421 is the same thing. It was just one was the Senate side and one was the House side. Okay, lots of fun that are going on there. Guys, I got one other thing I want to bring up to you real quick, and that's just, I want to read a little bit to you from the website of Black Lives Matter, just in case you didn't know about some of the things they believe in. It's What We Believe, and that's coming up in just a moment. Go ahead and pull it up. Lots of fun here. Of course, this page, pretty big page going on with What We Believe. What I found out through just talking with people out and about around town in my general areas, that most of them have not been to the Black Lives Matter or even very many Democratic or any opposite sites web pages. Like if you're a Republican, lots of people I talk to don't necessarily watch CNN or don't listen to any of the sound bites or don't go to the DNC's webpage or things like that. So I think one that's really important for us to look at real quick is just a couple of lines here. There's a lot going on with this statement, but this is the Black Lives Matter, What We Believe. Now, this is the organization, and there's a couple of things that are important about that. It's going to go into some history beginning 4 years ago with the Black Lives Matter Global Network. Is going to talk about Trayvon Martin and all of these things. Now, a lot of this stuff has quite a bit to do with creating an emotional response, which is normal when you're trying to engage somebody. I'll remember that it's also written from a perspective that is going to be empowerment of blacks over whites or anybody else, because the concept is black lives don't matter. All lives don't matter until black lives matter, right? Now, that argument's been going on for years, how people talk about that, blue lives, this, that, and there. And if you have to put a color in front of lives matter, you've got a problem in the first place, because realistically, all lives matter. The Lord God told us so. But when you get through all of this and you read through it and the history and everything, you're going to find some key tenets. And it's right here, right about halfway down, they start talking, after they get through their history, they start talking with this line: our commitment to the liberation for all black people means that we are continuing to work the work of our ancestors and fighting for the collective freedom because it's our duty. All right, people that want freedom, definitely, I can deal with that, fight for freedom, okay? That's not what's happening in riots across the world, or, that's not what's happening in America. Fighting for freedom is turning into something a little different. But every day we recommit to healing ourselves and each other by co-creating alongside our comrades, allies, and a family, a culture where each person feels seen, heard, and supported. And we acknowledge, now here's the deal, this is what they're affirming: we acknowledge, respect, and celebrate differences and commonalities. Think about that for a second. There's not a celebration of differences at all, okay? This is an outright lie. You can just look and see how people are being treated. What about little Cannon that was just shot in the head? Quite a bit of stuff like that going on. We work vigorously for freedom and justice for black people and, by extension, all people. Black people, possibly, but doubtful. Once again, possibly a lie. Look what happened to George Floyd, terrible thing, Trayvon Martin and stuff like that. But a lot of the times, just like we've seen in all of these instances, the truth of the matter comes out a little bit different than what the narrative of the matter is. It doesn't mean that they're not tragedies. It does mean that the story is hijacked to meet a narrative that probably doesn't match the same level of anger and outrage that it would had the story been told straight. Continuing on, we intentionally build and nurture a beloved community that is bonded together through a beautiful struggle that is resilient, that is restorative, and not depleting. So sure, I agree with that. You build bonds with your comrades in arms, and that's what it is. We are unapologetically black in our positioning. In affirming that Black Lives Matter, we need not qualify our position. To love and desire freedom and justice for ourselves is a prerequisite for wanting the same for others. Well, I agree with the last part. If you want freedom for yourself, you should want it for others, because you would recognize that to be free is an unalienable right. But being unapologetically black in their positioning, that's fluff talk. Affirming that Black Lives Matter and they do not need to qualify their position means whatever they say, they don't have to listen to you, they don't have to listen to facts, they don't have to think about someone else's positioning, and they don't have to apologize about it. So anything that you might have as far as on your side about discussions, they aren't important because they don't have to listen. They don't even need to qualify their position. We see ourselves as a global black family, and we are aware of the different ways that we are impacted by privilege or privileged as black people who exist in different parts of the world. Okay, that's fine. We are guided by the fact that Black Lives Matter regardless of all actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs, immigration status, or location. We make a special space for our transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. Well, a lot of what's going on here stems from a couple of things. And the first part in this ideology is that they don't need to qualify their position, and they are unapologetic about it. The reason that's important is because as you continue, down here you find a very important part is that they want to disrupt. We disrupt, this is a quote, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as an extended family and village that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. So with all of that, when you start talking about disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family, that's the concept that this country was founded on, a Judeo-Christian belief that the Lord is our Savior and that He blessed America, possibly even through Abraham and Sarah. Depends on exactly what you want to believe and read. But without getting too deep into it, when you want to bust up the narrative of a good value system, you get all kinds of crazy stuff. And what makes Christianity especially important with this and important to break up is it's that the uniqueness of a singular God that's bringing us together is something that has given a morality to America that allowed it to save itself, recorrect for past indiscretions, as well as moving forward and save the world in World War II. These are thoughts, that today are being thrown back and tread upon. And part of it is by mixing up all of these concepts and destroying that and making it easy that anybody can be whatever they want or however they want. Black lives do matter, 100%. And if anyone tells you that they don't, that's a problem. The organization Black Lives Matter is taking that narrative that Black Lives Matter, just like all lives matter, and twisting it for political gain. And I think if you go over here and you read some of this some more, you might come to that same conclusion yourself. That's going to do it for tonight. We are done. I want to thank you for watching. If you got any comments, don't forget to leave them down below. Find me over at anchor.fm/VA2A News. If you want to leave a comment to this, then we can bring up in another show. It would be quite a bit of fun. As well as, don't forget to check out the VA2A website. Hit us up over on Facebook and YouTube. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of this kind of format. I'm Rob. I'm happy to be your host today. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.